the tough work ahead, but the important thing is that we've started that process. And what the president did not find acceptable was an endless war in Europe that was literally has turned into a meat grinder of people on both sides. So if you just think about, just in a few months, President Trump has shifted the entire global conversation from not if the war is going to end, but just how it's going to end. And only President Trump can do that. And in the Oval Office less than a week ago, both President Putin and President Zelensky both said to him, only you, President Trump, could drive this war to a conclusion.
What concessions do you expect?
Well, again, we're not going to pre-negotiate an end to this conflict. These are the kinds of things that have to happen through hard and difficult diplomacy in closed rooms over a period of time. What's important to understand is two things. The first is the only leader in the world who can make this happen, who can even bring people together to begin to talk about it in a serious way, is President Trump. He's the only one in the world that can do that right now. The second thing I would say is that in order for a conflict to end, everyone involved in that conflict has to be okay with it. It has to be acceptable to them. But we have to understand that it's been 3.5 years since there's been any sort of regularized contact between the United States and Russia, and in some cases between any of the participants in this conflict and Russia. So the goal of today's meeting was to follow up on the phone call the President had a week ago and begin to establish those lines of communication. The work remains. Today is the first step of a long and difficult journey, but an important one. And President Trump is committed to bringing an end to this conflict, and as he said when he campaigned for president. And he wants it to end in a way that's fair. He wants it to end in a way that's sustainable and enduring, not that leads to another conflict in 2 to 3 years. That's not going to be easy to achieve, but he's the only one in the world that can begin that process. Donald Trump is the only leader in the world that could initiate that process, and today was the first step in that process.
Is sanctions relief going to be involved in any of this normalizing or trying to more level set the relationship between the U.S. and Russia? Did the Russians bring up sanctions relief in the meeting today?
Well, sanctions are all the result of this conflict. There are sanctions that were imposed as a result of this conflict. And so I would say to you that in order to bring an end to any conflict, there has to be concessions made by all sides. We're not going to predetermine what those are. We're certainly not going to negotiate this today or in a press conference for that matter. But and there are other parties that have sanctions. The European Union is going to have to be at the table at some point because they have sanctions as well that have been imposed. So, but I guess the point here is the goal is, and we agreed on what the goal is to bring an end to this conflict in a way that's fair, enduring, sustainable, and acceptable to all parties involved. What that looks like, well, that's what this